In a forgotten corner of the Sahara Desert, beneath the shifting sands, lay the entrance to an ancient tomb, hidden from the world for centuries. Clara, a passionate archaeologist with an insatiable thirst for discovery, had dedicated her life to unearthing the secrets of the past. When she received word of the tomb's recent discovery, her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and dread, a feeling she could not shake. The local villagers spoke in hushed tones of the tomb's curse, warning that it held the echoes of the enslaved spirits trapped within its stone walls, forever longing for freedom. They told stories of explorers who had vanished after disturbing the ancient site, their voices lost to the whispers of the damned. Clara, however, dismissed their fears as mere superstitions, convinced that history was merely a puzzle waiting to be solved. Armed with her tools and relentless curiosity, she ventured into the depths of the tomb, unaware of the darkness that awaited her. As she squeezed through the narrow passage, the air grew cold and stale, wrapping around her like a shroud. Her lantern flickered against the damp stone, casting elongated shadows that seemed to writhe in anticipation. With each step deeper into the tomb, an unsettling sensation prickled at the back of her neck, like invisible fingers brushing against her skin. She shook it off, focusing on the treasures of the past that lay ahead. At last she entered the grand chamber. The sarcophagus lay at its center, adorned with intricate carvings depicting scenes of life and death, triumph and tragedy. Clara felt an inexplicable connection to the ancient priest whose remains lay within. With trembling hands, she brushed away the layers of dust, her breath hitching at the sight of the tattered linen wrappings that encased the mummy. Compelled by an unseen force, Clara pried open the lid. As it creaked open, a cold gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing her lantern and plunging her into darkness. Heart pounding, she fumbled for her flashlight, its beam flickering to life. In that brief moment of illumination, she caught sight of the mummy's lifeless face, a visage of pain and despair, as if the very essence of its existence had been preserved in suffering. The shadows around her began to stir, coalescing into forms that twisted and writhed, their outlines flickering like flames. Clara's heart raced as she realized the legends were true. The echoes of the enslaved surged forth, their anguished faces illuminated by her flashlight, mouths moving in silent screams. "Help us! Free us," they cried, their voices a haunting symphony of suffering. Panic set in as the shadows enveloped her, the air thick with sorrow and despair. "I didn't mean to disturb you," she cried, stumbling backward. "I just wanted to learn." But the spirits grew more agitated, their forms swirling like a tempest. "You seek knowledge, but at what cost?" one spirit shrieked, its hollow eyes locked onto hers. "You have awakened us from our eternal slumber." Clara felt an overwhelming urge to flee, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. The anguish of the spirits pressed against her, flooding her mind with their memories, images of oppression, betrayal, and a never-ending cycle of suffering. She gasped, overwhelmed by their pain, and as she fought to regain control, the tomb trembled violently. "I can help you," Clara shouted, her voice barely breaking through the cacophony. "I will tell your stories. You will not be forgotten." For a moment the spirits hesitated, their movements slowing as they turned to her. "You think you can save us?" the lead spirit hissed, its voice a chilling echo that reverberated through the chamber. "You cannot save those who do not wish to be saved." The shadows recoiled, and Clara felt an icy grip around her wrist, pulling her closer to the sarcophagus. "You must remember us," they cried, a chorus of despair that reverberated in her bones. "You must bear our stories." As Clara struggled against their grip, she realized she had become a conduit for their rage and sorrow. "I promise to remember," she shouted, desperation spilling from her lips. "I will share your pain with the world." The spirits paused, their expressions shifting from anger to a flicker of hope. "You promise," the lead spirit whispered, its voice trembling with uncertainty. "I promise," Clara replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "Your stories will be told. I will make sure of it." With her vow echoing in the silence, the spirits began to fade, their anguish dissipating like mist in the morning light. "Then perhaps we can rest," the lead spirit whispered, its form softening. But as the last vestiges of their forms dissolved, an unsettling chill settled into the chamber. Clara found herself alone, the oppressive weight of their suffering lifting. As she stumbled back into the night, the cool air felt refreshing, the dawn breaking over the horizon. Yet, even in her relief, a gnawing fear lingered deep within her. Had she truly set them free, or merely postponed their anguish? In the weeks that followed, Clara devoted herself to sharing the stories of the enslaved. She traveled to universities, giving lectures and writing articles that captivated audiences. Yet, with each retelling she felt the spirit's presence growing stronger, their whispers echoing in her mind. "Remember us," they urged, a constant reminder that their pain was a living part of history. But as the months turned into years, Clara's life began to unravel. Each night, the shadows would visit her dreams, figures wreathed in sorrow, their eyes hollow and pleading. She awoke in a cold sweat, haunted by their faces, their cries echoing in her ears. The more she tried to share their stories, the more she felt their anger rising, a tempest waiting to break free. One fateful night, Clara found herself unable to sleep, the weight of their suffering pressing down on her chest. She sat in her living room, the flickering candles casting dancing shadows against the walls. Desperation clawed at her, and she began to write, pouring their pain onto the pages. But the more she wrote, the more restless she became, a storm of emotions swirling within her. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted, and she felt a presence, an icy breath against her neck. She turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, its form draped in tattered linen, hollow eyes burning with intensity. Clara's heart raced as she recognized it as the lead spirit from the tomb. "You have not fulfilled your promise," it said, voice low and filled with despair. "We are still trapped between worlds, unable to rest. You must help us." Clara trembled, realizing the gravity of her actions. "I've tried. I've told your stories. But you do not truly understand our pain," the spirit cried, its voice echoing with a haunting resonance. "You must do more." A chill ran down Clara's spine. She understood then that merely recounting their stories was insufficient. She needed to confront the darkness that bound them. With newfound resolve, she grabbed her notes and returned to the tomb, determined to perform a ritual that could finally release them. As she stepped back into the chamber, the air crackled with energy, and the shadows began to stir, coalescing into a swirling mass of anguish. The spirits emerged, their faces contorted with longing, a mixture of hope and fury etched upon their features. "You have returned," the lead spirit whispered, eyes boring into her soul. "I'm here to help you find peace," Clara said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I will perform the ritual to free you." "But at what cost?" one spirit asked, its voice filled with dread. "To confront our pain is to confront yours." "I understand," Clara replied, tears streaming down her face. "I am ready." With the spirits gathered around her, Clara began the ritual, chanting the ancient words she had unearthed. The air thickened with tension, shadows danced wildly, swirling around her as she invoked the power of the past. The ground trembled beneath her, and she felt the weight of their memories pressing down on her. As she reached the climax of the chant, the spirit surged forward, merging with her consciousness. Memories flooded her mind, visions of their suffering, their enslavement, the betrayal they had endured. Clara screamed, feeling their pain seep into her soul, the anguish of centuries threatening to consume her. In the heart of the darkness, Clara felt her own fears rising, her isolation, her doubts, her guilt. She gasped, and the shadows tightened their grip, suffocating her in their torment. But in that abyss, she found a flicker of strength. "You are not alone," she cried, her voice echoing in the darkness. "Your stories will live on. I promise to carry your pain, to ensure the world remembers." The chamber erupted with energy, a blinding light engulfing Clara and the spirits. She felt their suffering lift, a wave of relief washing over her as they began to dissolve, their forms fading into the light. "Thank you," the lead spirit whispered, its voice a gentle breeze against her cheek. "You have freed us." But as the last remnants of the spirits faded, a lingering darkness settled in the chamber. Clara, panting and disoriented, found herself alone. As the light dimmed, she realized she was changed, marked by the pain of the enslaved, yet empowered by the knowledge that she had honored their stories. Returning to the surface, the dawn broke around her, illuminating the sands of the desert. The weight of their echoes still lingered within her, a constant reminder of her vow. In the years that followed, Clara dedicated her life to sharing their truth, traveling the world as a passionate advocate for those who had been silenced. She gave lectures that captivated audiences, but the more she spoke, the more she felt the shadows of the tomb pulling at her, reminding her of their pain. The spirits, though released, remained a part of her, a burden and a blessing. Every night, before she slept, she would whisper their names, a ritual that connected her to their suffering and their strength. But even as she found success, she sensed a creeping dread, a darkness lurking in the corners of her mind, whispering doubts and fears. The echoes of the enslaved would visit her dreams, their faces twisted in anguish, their voices a haunting chorus urging her to remember. As the years turned into a blur of advocacy and sleepless nights, Clara found herself increasingly isolated. Friends drifted away, unable to understand the weight she carried. The more she immersed herself in their stories, the more distant her own life felt. Shadows loomed over her existence, a constant reminder of the spirits she had vowed to honor. One fateful night, in the dim light of her apartment, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of despair. The walls seemed to close in on her, shadows flickering ominously. As she pored over her notes, she noticed something strange, a figure forming in the corner of her eye. When she turned, she saw the lead spirit, its expression more wrathful than she had ever seen. "You have forgotten our truth," it screamed, its voice reverberating through her bones. "You must suffer as we suffered. You must confront the darkness within you." Clara felt her heart race, fear gripping her throat. "I've honored you. I've shared your stories," she pleaded, but the spirit merely shook its head, its form flickering like a candle in a storm. "Words are not enough. You must feel our pain. You must live our truth," it howled, and Clara was swept back into the depths of the tomb, darkness swirling around her like a shroud. As she stumbled through the chamber, Clara felt the cold touch of the spirits, their anguished whispers echoing in her mind. "Feel our despair. Understand our fate," they cried, their voices a haunting melody of suffering that threatened to drown her. Clara fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the onslaught of memories. Visions of betrayal and violence filled her mind, sights and sounds of those who had suffered for centuries. She screamed, feeling as if the very essence of her being was being consumed by their sorrow. But in the depths of that darkness, a glimmer of understanding flickered within her. "You are not alone," she cried again, her voice resonating with newfound strength. "I will carry your pain. I will ensure the world never forgets." With that vow, a surge of energy coursed through her. The shadows began to shift, the spirits coalescing around her, forming a protective circle. Clara felt their anguish blending with her own, creating a symphony of pain and resilience that filled the chamber. As the chamber erupted with blinding light, Clara's spirit intertwined with theirs, a connection forged in suffering. The shadows around her began to dissolve, the oppressive weight of their memories lifting, leaving her breathless yet alive. "Thank you," the lead spirit whispered, its form becoming ethereal. "You have finally understood." With those final words, the tomb fell silent, and Clara stood alone, the chamber now bathed in the golden light of dawn. As the shadows faded into the horizon, she understood the true weight of her promise. In the years that followed, Clara dedicated her life not just to telling their stories, but to embodying their truth. She became a tireless advocate, her heart forever intertwined with the pain of those who had come before. Each lecture, each article, was no longer a mere recounting of history, it was a visceral testament to the resilience of the human spirit. But even as she found purpose in her mission, she knew the shadows would always linger, reminding her of the spirits that had awakened her, the echoes that lived on within her. Every night before she slept, Clara would whisper their names, a ritual that connected her to their suffering and their strength. The echoes of the enslaved would envelop her, a haunting melody of resilience, reminding her that their stories would never be forgotten. Yet, as time wore on, she became increasingly aware of the price of her promise. Her dreams morphed into nightmares, visions of the tomb, and its eternal darkness invading her sleep. She would awaken in terror, drenched in sweat, the cries of the spirits ringing in her ears. The boundaries between her life and the spectral world began to blur. Clara found herself haunted by their presence in the most mundane moments, in the quiet of her apartment, at crowded lectures, even in the laughter of her few remaining friends. One evening, as she prepared for a major presentation, Clara felt a shift in the air, an oppressive weight pressing down on her. The shadows crept into her periphery, and the familiar figure of the lead spirit materialized, its features contorted with rage. "Your promises were empty," it thundered, shaking the very foundation of her reality. "You have not done enough." The spirit's fury enveloped her, and Clara felt her heart race. "What more do you want from me?" she cried, desperation clawing at her throat. "I've dedicated my life to sharing your truth." "You must sacrifice for our stories to be told," the spirit roared, its voice a tempest of anguish. "Feel the depths of our despair, and you will unlock the power to free us." Before she could respond, Clara was plunged back into the depths of the tomb, darkness swirling around her. The shadows morphed into a maelstrom of memories, enveloping her in a cacophony of sorrow. She was overwhelmed by the pain of those who had suffered, their anguish seeping into her very being. "Remember. Remember," the voices chanted, a relentless mantra echoing in her mind. Clara felt herself drowning in their suffering, the weight of their stories pressing down on her chest. With every breath, she could feel the spirits wrapping around her, their pain becoming her own. Clara screamed, feeling as if she was being torn apart, but in that moment of despair, she grasped the essence of her mission. "I will not let you fade," she shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "I will carry your stories, and I will feel your pain." As she spoke, a surge of energy filled the chamber, the shadows beginning to coalesce around her, forming a protective barrier. The spirits' forms, once chaotic, started to stabilize, their anguish shifting into something deeper, something that resembled hope. "Then let us unite," the lead spirit cried, its voice resonating with strength. "Feel our pain and let it fuel your fire." Clara felt their memories flood her visions of despair, but also of resistance and resilience. She could see the faces of those who had suffered, the strength they had found in unity, the way they had carved out lives even amidst horror. The realization struck her like lightning: their stories were not just tales of suffering, they were also of survival, of triumph over adversity. With this understanding, Clara began to chant, her voice rising above the chaos. "We will remember. We will tell your stories. You are not forgotten." The chamber erupted with light, the walls shaking with the force of their combined energies. As the light enveloped her, Clara felt the spirits merging with her, their pain transforming into a powerful force. She screamed and wept, not from despair but from a profound sense of connection. In that moment she understood she was not merely a vessel for their suffering, she was a champion of their resilience. When the light faded, Clara found herself back in the tomb, the spirits around her more vibrant than ever. "You have done it," the lead spirit whispered, its eyes shining with gratitude. "You have unlocked the power to free us. Your pain is now our pain, and together, we shall ensure our stories are never forgotten." The chamber fell silent, and as the dawn broke outside, Clara knew she had become one with the echoes of the enslaved. She emerged from the tomb transformed, her heart heavy with their memories, but also filled with their strength. The weight of their pain was no longer a burden, it was a source of empowerment. In the years that followed, Clara continued her advocacy with renewed vigor, her presentations imbued with the spirit's stories of resilience. Each lecture became a cathartic experience, her voice a channel for their memories. She found a community of listeners who connected deeply with the stories she shared, and for the first time, she felt their suffering transforming into a force for change. But the spirits never truly left her, they were woven into the fabric of her being. Each night, as she prepared for sleep, she would call upon them, a ritual that connected her to their strength. She realized that honoring their memories was not a solitary act, it was a shared journey, one that echoed through generations. Yet, the horror of their suffering still lingered. In the quiet moments, Clara could still hear the distant cries of those who had come before her, a reminder that the shadows of history were always close. They were a part of her, and she embraced that truth, vowing to carry their stories forward until the end of her days. And so, she continued to walk the line between the living and the echoes of the enslaved, a keeper of their memories in a world that desperately needed to remember. In every shadow she saw their faces, in every whisper she felt their breath, and with every heartbeat she understood that she was never truly alone.